You're listening to The Young, where young people have real conversation on how to live a life worth living.
Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to The Young Podcast. My name is Nicole Stark and today I am joined with Nathan Torres and Aaron Revelos. Thank you guys so much for joining us yet again on this awesome podcast. Hey, before we start talking about what we're going to be talking about, I want to just ask y'all a few questions, okay? Just a little curious. I hang out with you guys on I feel like almost daily basis, weekly basis.
Yes.
And I hear different lingos all the time. All the time. I want to know where you guys get your lingos from. Such as, you say the craziest things. Where do you get them?
Right. Okay.
I just want to know, like, you have like a file and you're just like...
The archives. It's all in the archives.
Like,
no, okay, so, I don't know.
And how do you come up
sometimes,
with
sometimes, honestly, I don't know, if I'm gonna be honest, like, I think a lot of it just comes from, like, high school me.
Okay.
But I take what I did in high school to a different magnitude.
Yes.
It's weird, and it just comes out kind of naturally. It's weird. I take a word or a phrase or something.
Right.
I just put either an adjective or a noun at the beginning of it.
It's a strange
for some odd apparent reason. I don't know. It's like...
Okay, one of my good friends, Sophia, y'all know Sophia.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't say anything cool, but she
Ever.
always... No. But she always has the randomest
She's
things.
like my favorite person
She
ever.
says, like, what the hookie?
Right.
You heard her say that, right?
Yes.
Like, where do people come up?
It's actually
with...
comedic.
I love
What
it.
is... It's... Okay, you say this thing... Well, you just literally said it. Instead of big God, you said...
Oh, Cap G?
Cap G.
Cap G.
What does that mean?
Word on Cap G.
Because God is capital G, so...
Yeah, you don't lowercase God.
Yeah.
So
You keep them on cap.
So
Feel me?
if I'm trying to talk about God, I say Cap G.
That's
I
all
just-
built to truth.
I saw it in a
Oh.
video,
You feel me?
and like, you know, I just thought, it's funny.
Okay, great. Yes. Okay. You know,
So,
maybe
yeah.
we'll like add like a link to where you can kind of give us all your stuff and y'all.
That means I have to create an area in which they can go get all
Right.
these things.
It probably won't happen, but if it does, like
Can you
thank
put
him.
that on my wonder list?
For real. Add it right now. Okay. Hey, we're gonna get started into this. Today is we're gonna go into another episode of how to take care of your soul. I love this because our soul is so important. Our soul is made up of three things: our mind,
Mm-hmm.
our will, what we
Yep.
want to do, and our emotion, right? How we feel,
Yep.
all these things. And today, I think this is going to be a very fun topic. We're going to be talking about the topic of rest. Yes, that is a rhyme.
Oh, I love it.
So do I, because it's honestly one of my favorite things to talk about. But I want to talk about this. Our generation today, the number one thing, I feel like this isn't like this isn't statistically maybe correct, but I just feel like one of the number one things we like to do is stress out. Like, it's almost like stress or like busyness is like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Right? Why? I love this verse, Matthew 11:28. Jesus is speaking, okay, and he's saying, "Come to me, all who labor and are weary, and I will give you rest."
Right.
Right? For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that rest.
Yeah.
What is the difference between resting in Jesus and maybe I'm just going to chill out and watch TV and Netflix it out? What do you think is the difference? Kind of explain to me a little bit of that. What rest means to you guys from that verse.
Yeah, alright, we being open.
Yeah.
You know, I've had days
Yeah.
where I just like sat at home, just watched like anime for like a whole day, like
Yeah.
an entire day. Like I don't think I've ever felt like the least productive until
Right.
that day. I did nothing except sit down on my bed, chill,
Yeah.
and I felt terrible at the end of it.
Yeah.
It's like I actually thought about my problems more,
Wow.
and I had like this concern about, man, I'm doing nothing, and since I'm doing nothing, I should be doing something, but what is it something I should be doing? But even though I know this is my period when I should be resting and not doing the thing that I'm thinking about, I'm kind of stressing myself out more by thinking about the thing that I'm not doing. You know what I mean?
No,
And that
I
statement
totally feel
alone,
ya.
like, stresses people out. They're like, whoa, Nate, I listened to this thing for peace, bro, and you're stressing me out on the podcast. And I'm sorry if I'm stressing you out, but I'm getting to a point. And after that long day, I just put on one worship song, had like a little worship session, just thank God for my day of
Yeah.
rest that I had. And I felt completely better in half an hour than I did for the
Yeah.
10-hour
Whole
period
day.
I had
Right.
this
Yeah.
entire day. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
And
Right.
truly, I think it's because when you put your rest in and put your time, energy, and effort and just give it to God, that's exactly what it is. You know, we look at rest as like an escape from the busyness and work we have,
Yeah.
but sometimes in rest we just sit down and try and internalize it all till
Sure.
it goes away. But really, rest, true rest in God, what he's saying, come to me for, you know, like we give it all out to God and we say,
Right.
God, I'm feeling this way, Lord. What is your word? So let me
So
speak
good.
what your word says over that
That's
situation.
good.
Yeah.
And the ability to do that is, I think, the ability to find rest in
That's
Jesus.
so good.
Yeah, that's
so
fire, dude. I think a really big point too, and this is I think where a lot of people just miss it completely altogether. So the difference between, you know, resting in the Lord in a sense, taking
Yeah.
that scripture and saying finding rest in the Lord,
Yeah.
and then just taking a break. There's a big difference, because when you rest in the Lord, you're receiving something from Him.
Yeah.
He says, "Come find rest in me." That implies that He has something to give you,
Good.
right?
Yeah.
So the rest that the Lord provides for us is rest for everything.
So
It's
good.
for our body,
Yeah.
for our soul,
Yeah.
and for our spirit even.
That's so
Our
good.
spirit, man.
That's so good.
That's the rest that He gives,
Yeah.
right? But then there's the rest. I put quotes on that. It's the rest that Nate was talking about, where you're chilling on the couch watching anime all
Yeah.
day, or you're watching TV, or you know what I mean, just being unproductive. What that actually is when you don't go to the Lord for your rest, when you don't actually be intentional in
Yeah.
resting in Him,
Yeah.
you're actually just giving your flesh, your human desires,
Yeah.
an opportunity to soak in what it
That's
wants.
good.
That's actually what
good.
it's doing. So you're not actually resting,
Yeah.
you're just satisfying a desire that you
Wow.
have,
So good.
right?
Right.
Because
Right.
when you think about it, like whatever, like you're in sports, let's just take sports for an example. When you practice for like hours on end,
Yeah.
your body craves stopping.
Sleep, yeah.
It craves sleep, it craves water, it craves
Yeah.
things that it doesn't have,
Right.
right? So when you're hustling all week, it's the same thing. Our bodies want rest. They just want to chill. They just want to stop, right? You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's bad to do that at
Right.
all. But if you're not intentional with going to God for
That's
your
so
rest,
good.
if you're not intentional to go to His Word and read what He's saying,
Yeah.
if you're not intentional to go to Him specifically,
Yeah.
then you'll just do all the things that your flesh wants to do, which is
So
just
good.
watch TV, which
Yeah.
is eat
Yeah.
bad food all day,
Right.
which is to do these things. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a big difference
Yeah.
between being intentional to go to God for your rest
Yeah.
and actually just satisfying the flesh,
That's
giving your
so
desires
good.
what it wants, just
So
giving
That's
in.
so good.
So there's a big difference that I think we miss.
I love it. Now, do you think there's discipline when it comes to rest? Because you're
Yeah.
mentioning athletes, right?
Right.
I think we've all played sports in here. One of the things for me was I hated ice baths.
Mm.
Hated them.
Yeah, those are trash.
Right? But I knew it was good
Mhm.
for my body.
Yeah.
For me to sit there for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And what felt like this is the worst thing ever, once I got out of it, it was so relaxing. So you
Yeah.
think there's a discipline when it comes to, hey God, I'm gonna choose you, even though I don't want to, even though there's no part of me that wants to come to you and ask for help,
Yeah.
or for you to come and give me rest. But do you think there's a discipline in coming to that? If so, why?
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
completely. There's a discipline. Yeah, because even if you look at it in this standpoint, sometimes when you get, pretty hot on a roll with something,
Yeah.
like you get productive at something and
Yeah.
you're working something, even for good intentions, you're building a business,
Sure.
you're starting whatever, and you're working at something, you can get addicted to productivity.
Yeah.
You can get addicted to doing it over and
Yeah.
over and working at it and chipping at it every day.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point when you kind of feel like you don't need God.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't need what He has to offer. You know what I mean? You get very confident in what you're able to
Yeah.
do, and you get confident in what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You're like, this product I'm working on, this thing, this
Yeah.
sport, this business, whatever it is I'm hustling at, it's looking good and I'm getting good at it. And you feel like there's a point where you don't need God. You know what I mean? But that's a very dangerous place.
Right.
That's a very dangerous place when you feel like you don't need God, because
Yeah.
there will come a point in your hustling.
Yeah.
There'll come a point in your working at it where your humanness will collapse. It'll just come to a point where you realize, I can't do this.
So
you know what I mean? I am overwhelmed. My thoughts, they're overwhelming you. You know what I mean? There'll come a point where you hit it. And that's why it's important to have discipline before you get to that place of burnout.
That's good.
Before you get there. Because if you can develop a habit early in whatever you're starting, if you can develop a habit early to work a week and then on the weekend go and just be with God. Don't worry about, even if it's like ministry stuff, church stuff, don't worry about that. If it's the business, don't worry about that. Just go and be with God. If you can develop that discipline early to wake up in the mornings, to spend however much time you need to with God. Whatever it is, whatever your discipline looks like, whatever time of the day it is for you, if you can build that early, then you won't even get to that point where you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to pull out my, oh my gosh, like I feel like I can't do this anymore. You know, and you'll completely avoid that. Just like you said, if you can develop that discipline early.
I just like want to say something real quick. Like, it's talking about discipline. I think I heard about like a study done on athletes and stuff. We were talking about sports. Athletes who like on their water breaks just like pound down a water bottle versus people who just like sip the water like normal. And the people who are disciplined enough to drink a water bottle normally, I know it sounds weird. What do you mean drink a water bottle normally? How else would you drink it? Would you start from the bottom? Like, you know what I mean? But like, I'm talking about like when you chug a water because you're like, I'm dying of thirst, rather than, oh, I'm going to just drink a water like normal, nice and calm, right? Those people who had the discipline to take it down slowly lasted longer and didn't burn out than the people who just chugged it down, which seems contradictory, but actually is where they had the sustenance that they wanted.
Good. You know, I struggled in my, like, growing up. The number one thing I struggled, not the number one, probably top 3 or 4, but anxiety. Right, I dealt with anxiety, and I remember the Lord, actually this year last year, 2018, started to teach me on this thing of rest. There's this verse that he told me, I need you to meditate on it, and it's simply this: be still and know I am God. And now here's where I did not apply discipline. I said, Jesus, I have been following you for some time now. Thank you so much for this verse. I've got it. Right? And I legit thought I had it. And all of a sudden, it wasn't until, maybe 4, 5, 6 months later, where I started dealing with heavy anxiety, where I would be so nervous and afraid, or I would panic or something like that over the littlest things. Like, I would get an email from someone and it would freak me out, right? Or I would have
nasty sometimes.
Yes,
those
or
coming heavy,
bro. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's an email.
Right.
But it put me in a place of fear.
Crazy.
Or it put me in a place of, oh my gosh, like, God, like, what are you trying to, like, God, like, what's going on? And here's the lesson God tried to teach me and has taught me is, hey, I need you to be still. I need you to trust in me. I need you to rest in me. And we're not going to really tackle the conversation of anxiety just yet, as we will in further podcasts. But one of the things I had to learn was being still. And here's what I started to implement in my personal life is every morning, no matter what time it is, if I have to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, I'm up 2 hours before because I need to spend at least 30, 40, 50, maybe even an hour with Jesus. And what I like to do, and this sounds crazy, is just sit in quiet and say, Jesus, come. And I sit in silence. And it's the craziest thing, but all of a sudden I start to put my focus on, no, God, you give me peace. No, Jesus, I put my trust in you. No, Jesus, I don't have to be anxious about this. Like, you're in control. And through a process of time, I've gone in this place of, man, I don't got to deal with anxiety the way I dealt with it. I don't got to walk around anxious or worried about people. Why? Because my rest and my trust is not in a source that is human. But it's in the source, which is Jesus. I want to ask y'all this question. Have you ever been in a place where you felt like the pressure was too much? Or the pressure was too much to where you felt like, I can't do this? And if so, how did you find rest and peace and hope in Jesus, your source?
Well, last year we both did like a huge sacrifice.
Yeah.
But like for me in the internship I did last year, I served here full time, so it's like 6 days a week. I remember one day I worked like 6 a.m. to like 6 a.m. to 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And like having to get up for church the next day, and like within this internship there was a lot of things that I felt pressured. There's a lot of things where I was like, whoa, like this is bigger than me, like I can't, or in another sense where it's like, man, I have all these things due and I don't even know where to start,
Yeah.
What I just found myself developing this habit of having to say, man, but God is good, and like it's so crazy, just tagging that at the end of everything brings you back to that fact, like what you're saying, Nicole, like be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
And being able to root myself and saying, okay, like amidst this huge thing that's going around me, it may feel like a storm,
Yeah.
like I can have the safety and security that God gives me the peace that I need to navigate these things. And then all of a sudden I just say, okay, I'm just gonna take it one at a time.
Yeah.
And every time I just say, I'm gonna know that there's God. I have God on me. And by the end of the day I'm like, how did I do all of that?
Yeah.
And it's because I had God to just comfort me the whole time.
So good. Too, I think, and we've even said this in previous podcasts, it all comes down to, I love this, be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
And I think we've touched on this, but I feel like we should touch on it again. The importance of knowing God.
Yeah.
Like when you know Jesus is the Prince of Peace, then we don't have to run to Netflix to find peace.
Right.
When we know Jesus is the Prince of Peace, then we don't have to run to alcohol to numb us and give us a peace.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because I feel like in today's culture, there's so many counterfeits.
Yeah.
Right? Counterfeit, peace, like a piece of, there's just things that you run to which will give you peace, but only for a moment.
Yeah.
Right? You'll run to things that will satisfy you for a moment.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever in your life ran to things where you're like, oh, this is gonna give it to me, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, that didn't do anything to me?
Yeah.
Ever been moments like that?
Yeah, completely. I think, as people, we all have that craving, like we said, because as busy as we are, as, humans are, we just tend to, find ourselves doing something. There comes a point where you need that peace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You need something to calm you down. You need something to satisfy the urges that you have. So for me, one of the things that I dealt with that was, I felt would calm me down or, relieve stress was pornography. For me, that was something that, I struggled with for a long time.
Yeah.
Even when I was here, at the church, in the youth group, when I was in high school,
Yeah.
It's something I struggled with throughout all high school, I was a productive kid in high school. I did sports.
Yeah.
I was creative. I did did a lot of creative classes.
Yeah.
Very productive. I was even serving here in the youth ministry, serving here. But, this one thing was the thing that I kept finding myself going back to.
Wow.
Because I didn't quite understand that this is something that I could be away from.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
So
I didn't fully get the revelation. I didn't fully get the thought of me ever living my life without it.
So good.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I found myself in a place where I was okay with, doing my life and then having this little thing on the side.
Wow.
Finding myself back in this little corner.
Yeah.
Doing this
Yeah.
thing that I'm not really proud to tell anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So
At the
good.
time.
Right.
But I didn't quite grasp the idea that, oh my gosh, I can live life without this little thing.
So good.
But when I, encountered Jesus, for the first actual time, where he came in, I encountered him for myself, and I realized he gave me the revelation, he gave me the, the sight of me seeing myself away from these things.
Wow.
When I finally, encountered Jesus in that way, I realized, oh my gosh, Jesus is better than this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jesus is
So
better
good.
than pornography. Jesus
So
is
good.
better than alcohol.
Yeah.
Jesus is better than drugs. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because he gives you something that these materialistic
Come on.
things can never
Right.
give you.
Come on.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We as, people, like you said, I love how you talked about it. the soul, it's made up of 3 different parts.
Yeah.
That soul actually covers the spirit.
Wow.
I'm gonna give you a little fun fact. Our spirit man, everybody has one.
Right.
We all have a spirit man
Right,
on the
right.
inside. But it's covered
Yeah.
in this humanness, in this, our thoughts and our emotions and stuff.
Mm.
It covers the spirit. Your spirit just longs for Jesus.
Yeah.
But it's covered
Yeah.
in this humanness, in this mess. You know what I mean? It's all
Yeah.
covered in that. But when you encounter Jesus, when you surrender and you say, God, I'm dealing with these addictions.
Yeah.
God, I'm stressed out beyond belief.
Right.
God, I don't know how I can live another week.
Right.
When you reach
So
that
good.
point
Yeah.
and you finally encounter Jesus and you say, I got nothing left.
Right.
When you have
So
nothing
good.
left to give and you just say, Jesus, have it all.
Yeah.
That's when he comes in and shows his love to you and what
Right.
it actually looks like.
Come on.
Because then that spirit man is awakened and becomes
Yeah.
alive.
So good.
Right.
And then you realize, oh my gosh, like I don't know how I lived without
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yes.
how I lived without Jesus
Yeah.
speaking to me
Yeah.
and giving me life.
Yep.
And like just for me and my own personal story, meeting Jesus and encountering him, it was amazing. And I realized I could live, without, pornography.
Yeah.
I could live, without drugs and drinking on the
Right.
weekends. I learned I could live through that, and it was a process of walking out of those
Yeah.
things.
Sure.
It
sure.
took some time to
Right.
get out of, to break those habits that
Right.
that I had for a long time. It took time, but I realized, oh my gosh, Jesus is so much better than these
That's
other
so
things.
good. You know what comes to mind is this verse that says, "Taste and see."
Yes.
That the Lord is good.
Yeah, so
Come on,
good.
because when we taste and see that God, you are good,
Yeah.
and then you start to realize, man, everything else is counterfeit. It's kind of like this. It's kind of silly. I used to do CrossFit. Plug.
Silly.
But I remember for 2 months we did this thing where it was called the Whole 30. It was supposed to be a 30-day challenge, but we did it for 2 months. But the whole thing was we couldn't eat sugars, we couldn't eat bread, we couldn't have pasta, we couldn't have dairy.
So
And it,
Could you not have fun?
oh my gosh, tell me about it. It was, the
Lord.
struggle was real. But I did that, right? I did this whole thing. I went 2 months without these things. And I remember the moment the whole 30 challenge was done, right? And our CrossFit team celebrated, and we went out, and I remember I had like my first cookie. It was so gross. Like I could not believe, and I remember I ate Takis. Oh, I was so disgusted. I was like, I cannot believe this is in my body.
Right.
But here's the reality. I started tasting how good fruits actually were. I know this sounds so crazy.
Mhm.
I started to
Shout
taste
out
like
to fruits.
these
Yep.
these things are actually so healthy for you.
Yeah.
I started to crave,
Yeah.
and the things that I thought were good,
Yeah.
all of a sudden became a
Right.
distaste.
Right.
Right? And I think this verse where it says taste and see that the Lord is good, once you start to see God, Jesus, you're actually really good. Jesus, you could actually satisfy me. Now, all of a sudden, the cravings to alcohol, the cravings to pornography, once we start to realize, and I love how you said it's a process.
Yeah.
Because freedom is a process.
Yeah. Completely.
Right? But we start to realize, man, God, you're better than that. All of a sudden, our attention and our
Yeah.
eyes start to go after those things.
Yeah.
I love that. I want to ask y'all one more question, and we'll kind of conclude here. That went by so fast, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Great.
fast.
But I want to ask this question. Our soul oh my gosh. Here I go. Naren. Here I go with the names yet again. Aaron said this, that when you are longing for Jesus, right? We all have a longing for Jesus. When did you guys get to that place where you're like, man, I'm over it. Like, I'm over the everyday, normal life that everyone else keeps doing, and I need more than just something that's going to go away. When did you realize, man, I need Jesus in my life to satisfy me?
Yeah, for me, I think it was in high school. I was actually gonna share this like earlier, but it like flows perfectly. You
Yeah.
know, God's so good. Yeah, when I was in high school, I feel like a part of me wanted like so much peace, so much love from these different avenues, like what Aaron was talking about. You know, when you turn to these material goods, you know, they're gonna keep on failing you. And I think for me, I tried to itemize all of these different things as if they were material, you know. So peace, love, hope, you know. In basketball, I would play basketball. People are like, "Hey, basketball isn't that bad." It's like, yeah, but when you put your piece there, it's limited to just basketball. And so when you don't get in basketball, everything else is broken. So when you put your love in somebody that you're not even secure loves you back, it's you're not gonna get it, you know.
Right.
And so for me, it was when I quit basketball because I was like, I'm not getting the piece there. And I have my friends there. They all transferred, you know. I'm like getting like depressed now. And like I had this girl I was talking to, she broke my heart, you know what I mean? And I remember this feeling of like, man, all of these things that I had this longing and like search for, like every time they had that goodness at first, that goodness, I say in quotes, you know.
Right.
But the marginal benefit decreased every time I would go.
Wow.
So every time I would go back to it, it just didn't have that same effect as when I first did it.
Yeah.
And so that led me to this place where I was like, man, I need that. And then that's when God came into my life, and like the reality of Jesus hit me.
That's good.
And I was like, what is that? I'm like, that Jesus is eternal and God's eternal, which means my peace is eternal.
Wow.
And it surpasses all understanding.
Right,
so no matter what's going on, I don't even need to understand it, but I could have peace in that situation.
Good. Yeah.
And I know that God's love for me is eternal.
Yeah.
And it will never fail me.
That's good.
And on those things alone, I was like, wow, my life is so much more than what I limited it to.
Yeah.
And I remember going back to what you're saying, taste and see the Lord is good, that there is depth, you know. And we said freedom's a process, but I believe in the same sense too, that there's a process and a depthness to the intimacy you could have with God and that peace, to where all of a sudden you're like, wow, God, you open up this, like one thing, whether it's music, whether it's these other things that you didn't know you had, to now all of a sudden you're saying, but there's still even more to God's love and peace that He's opening up. And He'll show you how you can, like, you know, it's just so good.
I love it. You know, this isn't a relationship podcast, but speaking in terms of we don't get peace from people, I think sometimes we think that a person, or if you're in a relationship, that person is never supposed to complete you, right? They're only supposed to complement you. Right, and I think a lot of the times we look for people to give us peace. We look for a certain person to give us love. We look for a certain person to fill the void that we all have, that only Jesus can fill. Yeah. And so I love how the person we should always run to is Jesus Himself. You know, and not in a and I think we've said this too. It's not in a religious way, but we're realizing, man, this is a relationship we can have with Jesus. Yeah. And it's so good. And so one last thing, in regards to walking in peace, in regards to your source being Jesus, how do you guys do that in your everyday life? How do you find peace? How do you kind of really facilitate that in your life when you're going through things? How do you adjust and say, okay, God, I'm feeling this way, but I know what your word says? How does your everyday life look like when it comes to those things?
So...
I mean, you
can... All right, okay.
So we all in the back said awkward.
Okay.
She said stop.
All right. I hope it's not too long that we have to cut it.
I know, huh?
So, I'll say this. So, for a daily thing, I like to start my mornings off just simply reading the Word. Okay. I take my Bible and I open it up. And I pray and I ask the Lord to just talk with me, sit with me, as if I'm like having coffee with, a friend in the morning. And I always start my morning with a coffee, amen. So that's how I do it. You know, I just go and I pour the pot and, I go and read my Bible and ask God to speak to me, you know what I mean? And that's how I'll start my mornings. And then some worship afterward, I'll just like type in it on YouTube, you know what I mean? A couple worship songs and that's how I start every morning, just so I get in the right headspace. You know what I mean? Good. And I'm not starting my day, you know what I mean, with emails and this and that and whatever, the whole works. But just so simply, that's how I started, just with the word and worship.
So good.
talking with God.
Nate?
Yeah, like the same thing. I mean, you said it yourself.
Right,
like,
right.
you know, when you have a situation going on, you just go back to what does God's word say about
Yep.
that situation, not how does my situation dictate
Yeah.
my life, you know?
That's
Yeah.
so good.
And yeah, definitely like in the morning when I'm driving, like I love to start off my mornings just listening to worship music and just declaring like what God says over my life.
I love it. You know what we'll do? Whoever's listening to this or watching this, we have a link. If you DM the Rock Jesus Club, we'll send you links to scriptures of what God says about your certain
Sick.
situation.
Yeah.
It's helped me out. It's probably helped you guys out tapping into God's word. But hey, before we conclude this, we have this thing that we like to do called the last 30.
Last 30.
So you got 30 seconds to share the last piece of advice. Aaron, I'm not going to start with you.
Yeah,
I've done that before.
Like twice.
Yeah,
It's
whatever.
scary, bro.
It's
Yeah,
here it
twice.
is. Okay,
Oh,
so
shoot, there it is.
we got it. Okay.
Aye.
I'll start. We'll go with Nate, and then we'll go finish with Aaron. But here we go. 30 seconds starting now. My advice to you is you can trust in God. You can rest in Him, and I'm telling you, if you seek Jesus, meaning if you just spend time with Him every single day, you will find Him and you'll find rest in Him. Bam! What was that, like 15 seconds?
That was good.
That was 15. All right?
Oh, I guess I feel a little pressure. All right, here we
Here we
go.
go. Last 30.
Last
Short and
30.
sweet, baby.
Oh.
Your peace can last forever if you put your trust in God. I think, like what we were saying, don't put it in people. I mean, put your, you know, like you could trust people.
Yeah.
I'm not saying have trust issues, but put the things that you long for in the eternal thing, which is God.
It's good.
Sick.
It's good. All right. Hey, Aaron.
Sweet. All right, my last 30 is the hustle is not 24/7, 7 days a week. That's not it. Even I love looking at it. Look at the scriptures. Like when God created everything, the heavens and the earth, it says, it describes every day He worked, and it says on the last day He rested. God relaxed. God chilled.
That's good.
So if God had a day to relax,
y'all can have
who are we? Like I'm gonna leave it at that. Who are
That's
we?
so good.
Alright, we
Come
have
on.
to relax.
Yes.
Alright.
Snap your fingers. Hey, that is it for today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening and or watching. As you know, we had podcasts every single Friday, so tune in next week to hear the next podcast. Anyways, love y'all and see ya. Bye.